Up next on Inside the SCCA, our June Sprints Preview Show. Welcome to this episode of Inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski. Episode, I probably should look these up before I start. I think we're at 168, maybe 169, could even be 170. I don't know. After all these episodes, I've run out of the ability to remember what episode we're on. Up on today's show, we're going to talk about the June Sprints. Our guest is none other than Ed Zabinski, a national champion at Road America as well. So he is the perfect guy to have with us. Hey, Ed, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Ryan. Thanks for having me. I'd love a chance to talk about one of my favorite racetracks.
Well, it is one of my favorite racetracks as well. I grew up about 90 minutes from Road America. My first driver's school was at Road America. I discovered,
Awesome.
as I like to, I probably told the story one too many times. I discovered fast cars and bikinis at Road America as a teenager.
Really?
Yes.
Outstanding.
It was kind of a coming of age thing for me. So it was during an IMSA GTP weekend back in the 80s. Best friend's dad took me and my buddy up there to the racetrack, and I got hooked, line and sinker into this motorsports thing. So I've got you here, and you've got a lot of time at Road America. We're going to talk all about that. You work a lot with Scotty B. White. We're going to talk about that as well. But first, the first question that I ask everybody, here it comes. How did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we love?
Wow, that's a great question. I've always loved cars of any kind. Since I was a young kid, there are lots of photos. In fact, just recently I went through some of these photos. My mom would have been, on June 12th, she would have been 100 years old.
Wow.
And that inspired me to go back and look through some photos. And there was a photo of me at Pacific Raceways, which was called Pacific Raceways back then when I was 2, before it became Seattle International, before it went back to Pacific Raceways.
Got it.
And it was me sitting in a go-kart where I couldn't even reach the pedals, and I was at like 2.5 years old. My first lap around Pacific Raceways was when I was on my mom's lap in my dad's 64 Corvette at age 4. I just told everybody how old I am now, which is not good. It was a used car. He'd had it for 20 years before I did that. But anyway, a very young age, I got my first lap around there. And that really got me hooked on racing. But then my dad passed away. My mom hated racing.
Wow.
And I became a musician. So I was a professional touring musician for a while, and worked at a college teaching people how to be musicians, and kind of learned some of my teaching chops kind of came from the experience of working in the college level, musician kind of deal and teaching other professionals. And then a friend of mine went to the Elf Winfield School in France. His name's Mike Meredith. He's another guy from Seattle. And Mike was renting a Capri from a fellow named Bob McDaniel in the Seattle area. And he invited me to come out and see. He said, "Hey, I'm renting a race car. I'm out here at Seattle. I want to know if you want to come watch." I said, "Wait, 2 things. You're racing. That's great. Second, you can rent a race car? Wow. I didn't know you could do that." So I was about 24 probably at the time. And so I went out and I watched Mike race. And at that time, I think Bob did a deal. It was 6 races in 5 weekends for $2,500.
Wow.
And I thought, man, might as well have been $25 million. Yeah. I mean, there's no way that I was going to be able to afford that. So I decided the right thing to do would be to buy like a $50 Fiat 124 coupe, and I could turn it into a race car myself.
Yep.
And just go racing for way less money than that huge $2,500 expenditure would have been. And so I did that. I learned how to be a mechanic then that first year in the Fiat. And then I built an RX-7 and started learning how to win races. And I think I won a championship my second or third year in that RX-7. And one of the things that happened in the Fiat that was interesting, though, and it'll lead into what we talk about today, I went to Portland. My first race ever wheel-to-wheel was a conference, is the competing sanctioning body in the Northwest to SCCA, and has been for a zillion years. Conference has one of the best novice programs, or used to. I think they probably still do. But one of the best novice development programs anywhere. And so what I did is I took that novice program, took the driver's school, did my first race in Portland, and I happened to finish ahead of all the other door slammers. I mean, my first race ever. It was in the rain. And I beat another Fiat 124 guy, and his crew chief came over and asked me a question. He said, "How did you do that? How did you beat us? It's your first race. How did you do that?" And And I think the last 40 years I've spent trying to answer that question for me and for other people. And that's what led me to be a driver coach. And I've been doing it since that day, really. I've been trying to figure out, well, how did I do that? What did I do right? Because I didn't have any freaking idea, like none of us do when we go out there. Even after a driving school, you might know, well, I know that I got to use the brakes and I know something about what oversteer and understeer might be, but the rest of it was all, hogwash and mysteries to me at that time.
Sure.
So my education experience and my racing experience led me into the idea that I better become a student of the sport right away and try to learn everything that I could. And every day at the track for me is a school day. And I think if I ever quit learning something every time I go to teach a driver, I'll probably quit once I quit learning, but I haven't yet. Learn something every time.
Yeah. All right. So this is a good
got me into racing.
Yeah. So this is a good example why I purposefully don't do a lot of pre-interviewing of people.
Okay.
Because we've stumbled upon something, and we're going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole here that has nothing to do with racing. Touring musician. What did you play, and who did you tour with?
Well, it was nothing big time. You would have never heard of me in racing, but you probably also wouldn't have heard of me in music. It was in school I played trumpet. I wanted to be a jazz trumpet player, and I wanted to be a screaming high lead trumpet player. And I've fallen short of both of those things in my career. But I also learned, like you at Road America, learning about bikinis and fast cars.
Oh yeah. I
learned that if you want to meet girls in music, you better hang a guitar around your neck.
Got it.
Because you can and I happened to learn how to play bass guitar in about a month.
Yep.
And started gigging in a month on bass guitar. There were a lot more gigs for bass guitar players than there were for trumpet players, and still are. And I still play a little bit of both instruments.
Nice.
But it was pretty cool.
I went to college to be a jazz saxophone player, and
oh man, nothing like great sax, Brian.
Absolutely, that's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. And I had a music teacher who told me I was no good, and for some reason I believed him, and I ended up in broadcasting. And I didn't pick up my horn for probably 25 years. Until my kid was born, and my kid was into music. And I'm like, all right, I'll pull this thing out. And I still had all of my saxophones and my clarinet and everything. And now I dabble here and there. But, touring musician.
Let me interrupt you for a second. That's fantastic. It sucks that director failed you. I mean, that is really bad.
Yes.
As a coach, one of my jobs is to be honest with drivers, right? But, I mean, I learned from my music director in high school, is a guy by the name of Hal Sherman. And Hal was a remarkable, exceptional jazz educator. I wish you would have gone to school at Kent Meridian High School in Kent and had a chance to learn what we learned. Yeah. He was a fantastic educator. And I took what he learned, what he taught us about how to play jazz and learn the language of jazz, right? Learn the nuances, learn the embellishments, learn all the subtleties that make something swing. And I apply all of that into racing and coaching racing drivers, because the rhythm of a lap is the same as the rhythm of a song.
No question.
You can't play the bridge when it's supposed to be the verse. You can't go through turn 7 when you're thinking about turn 6. And this is the same kinds of things you learn from music that you can apply directly to racing. And I use, even for non-musicians, I use a lot of musical techniques that I learned from Hal Sherman in teaching racing drivers how to be better, because racing is part science and part art. And the art part is the hard part to learn.
Yes.
So
my band director was awesome in high school. It was the college band director who told me to go pound sand. And thankfully, in the same building as the music department was the radio station. And I ended up there spinning records and being a news and sportscaster and all this kind of stuff. But you're absolutely right. And one of the concepts that I always take with me when I'm on the racetrack is, just like in a song, if you miss a note and the band's playing, you don't have time to think about the fact that you just effed up a note. You got to get right back into it, and because you got the rest of the band who's waiting for you to hit that whatever you need to hit next. And it's the same thing on the racetrack. If you miss a corner, if you don't hit your turn in right, you got to put that behind you and get yourself put back together.
That's right. Brian, that's exactly right on the money, and you're right in my wheelhouse of the way I teach things. Is, for one thing, the future is coming to you out of the front window. And if you miss an apex, if you miss a turn in, something like that, the earlier you recognize that, you can maybe minimize the problem. But once you've made the mistake, that is over. All you can do is forget about it and do better next time around. Just like if you play some clam in a song on the chorus, you got another one that's going to come around, do a better job the next time it comes around. But you can't think about it. You just have to put it out of your head and move on with your life and the lap and the song or whatever,
yep.
or American history, for example.
Absolutely.
That the future is out the windshield, not in the rearview mirror.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So before we get to picking your brain on coaching,
sure.
Tell us a little bit about you've got experience at Road America. You won a national championship there, right?
I did. I won my second national championship at Road America in Showroom Stock B, and I want to say it was 2010, I think.
Okay.
In a Mustang. But I sort of had a lot of experience at Road America before I ever got serious about racing there, because we built a lot of cars, that we tested a lot of cars there before I ever really raced there. So I knew the track well when I went there in 2010, and we had a plan, which is something we'll talk about more too. But I mean, you have to have a plan. And Lance Stewart had gone the year before. I don't know if you know Lance or not. He's like a really great driver, good friend of mine. Is an IMSA GTU champion. Mm-hmm. And we'd raced together for years in professional racing. And so we had a plan. He went and brought an SSB Mustang the year before and kind of got his ass handed to him. He finished in the top 10, I think, but he had no chance of really getting to the front. And so we talked about that, and I kind of had an interest in Showroom Stock B at that time. And I said, well, how about what if we had two Mustangs that worked together, and we just, drafted each other in qualifying and got a really good qualifying time, and then we helped each other in the early part of the races by having one frontal area for two motors. And as it turned out, that worked out really good. And if you get a chance to watch it sometime, it's still online. And that's a pretty good race to watch. I made one of the best moves I've ever made in all my years of racing in that race. I didn't qualify well. I think Lance got the better qualifying lap when we were working together. And he qualified, pretty high up, third, fourth. There's all national champions in the top 5 of that field that year, and past national champions, including me. And so Lance had a better start, but I had a chance to sort of study what was going on, and we worked together. And I made a move, and he was racing Toby Grahovic, and who was running in a BMW, and then it was Lance and I in the two Mustangs. We were running the top 3, and Toby had Lance behind him, and Lance was in his trunk. He was just all over him, and I was watching, and I watched them going into turn 1, and they were getting closer and closer to the inside going into that corner as Toby was defending against Lance, trying to climb into his trunk. And I realized that they were going to have a problem at the exit of turn 1 on the lap that they got, where they were all the way down on the inside. So I just laid back, went way left, got on the power super early, and I passed both of them between 1 and 3 and won the race.
Nice.
So it was a nice move. I'm pretty proud of that move, as you can tell, but I don't have a lot of them, but that's a pretty good one.
No.
And so that was a fun championship. And I love the track. And I finished on the podium every year that the Runoffs were there, in that series of 3 that, at least that I ran. I think I didn't run all of them, but I ran 3 that I ran. I finished on the podium every time.
Right. So Scotty B. White recommended me get you on the show because, as everybody knows, he's been on our show a couple of times. He's a friend of the show. As I like to refer to Scotty, he's a guy with an opinion and is never afraid to share it.
That's very cool.
But Scotty's awesome. We love having him. And when I was looking for someone for the Runoffs, actually before I even got ready to do this preview show, because I do a preview for every Super Tour, Scotty said, you got to get Ed Zabinski on the show. He'd be perfect for Road America. I'm like, all right, great, let's do it. So we connected and got things scheduled in, and I'm happy that you're here. So what are you doing these days? Are you driving much? I know you're doing some coaching. What else are you doing?
Well, it's funny. I earn my living coaching racing drivers. It's a meager living, but it's super fun, and I really enjoy it. And so I sort of make money coaching, and I spend it on racing.
Yes.
So it's doesn't leave much in the kitty at the end of the day. I haven't been racing as much as I've wanted to, and part of it is that I can't really get a handle around what class I want to race in. I built an AS car, and the rules were changing so fast, and the cars that I was trying to build were like, I get it ready to go, and then they changed something that I thought, well, maybe that's not going to work. And so then I have an E-Production 911 that I think I can probably win with. I just got it back from the engine shop, so that might be a 2025 thing if I do that. And so I just try to keep enough races under my belt to keep my license. And I get to do a lot of testing. I get to do a lot of work with other people. And so I do a lot of driving. I just don't do that much racing, not as much as I'd like to.
Right.
So I'm going to do more, though. It's in my it's definitely in my future to do more racing. And first of all, I want to say, because I know this is Inside the SCCA, and I talked about conference at the opening, but the reality is I love SCCA. I love the Sports Car Club of America, and I love it for a lot of good reasons. And one of them is the chase for the SCCA National Championship. It's always meant something. It used to mean more. I mean, back in the 60s and when in the first early part of the Runoffs era where they named national champions, it used to be that you named national championships by a collection of points.
Right.
And then when it came down to where it was a winner take all for all the beans, all the best guys in the country come down to one race, that is a unique and special thing in all of motorsports. And my favorite engineer, Jeff Brown, who worked with me at Level 5, he's worked at the Indy 500 a few times, and he says, Ed, I honestly think we were building a Ferrari for Scott Tucker at this time. I was testing at Road America with Jeff. And he said, this is a hard thing to do. I mean, this is as hard or harder than winning the Indy 500. I mean, it takes all this preparation, all this talent, all the right things have to happen. And it's still 90% that and still 90% luck.
Yep.
And so you got to do everything right in your preparation to have a chance just to not get beat in the actual race by some other thing. Like, my three things are, you can't have a good weekend unless you do these three things. You have to finish all the laps, no mistakes or penalties, and you have to push or drive a straight car into the trailer at the end of the weekend.
Yeah.
You don't do those things. You don't do those three things. You can't have a great weekend, right? So
Definitely.
It's simple. It's just not easy.
Exactly. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
That's exactly right. So that's why I love the SCCA. Really, is the runoffs for me that makes SCCA great. I just love the people. I love the all ages thing. I like to see younger drivers now. I'm seeing more younger drivers come in. I like to see many more women drivers coming in. And like the Etherington's so great to see. I've known Nikki since she was Kayla's age,
right? Pretty
much. And so that was a great podcast. And I do see many more women getting into the sport. So right. SCCA is a great place to start racing. It's a great place to continue racing. It's a great place, like for a guy like me that's had pro time and been involved in some pretty special programs. It's a great place to just race out the rest of my days. I'm happy to do it. It's a great organization.
Yeah. You mentioned conference. In the Midwest where I grew up, we had Midwest Council.
Same sort of deal.
Another regional series, and I feel like a lot of those have gone away. I know Council's still out there doing their thing, and now those were the regional competitors to the SCCA, but the SCCA never had a national competitor. Now there's NASA and some other folks out there. And I don't know, have you seen a little bit about the changes that are coming for the runoffs over the next couple of years?
Well, that's a very recent thing. Yep. I mean, it just happened, I think, over the weekend.
Yep.
And all I've seen is, of course, we never we talked about Scotty White. Scotty, as you know, fairly outspoken guy, and he and I are dear friends now. I mean, we were fierce competitors back in the day when I was racing Ferraris and he was racing Vipers, and we'll talk about that if you want. But he's very outspoken and very usually right. I have a lot of respect for Scotty. I think he's right most of the time. And although we differ sometimes, sure. and when we do, we are very good about it. But I have not studied it enough to develop an intelligent opinion about what's going on. I think change is going to be necessary for the survival of like the touring group and some of the other classes. I think there's a real reluctance to do the wrong thing.
Right.
There's also a real reluctance to do the right thing, because no matter what you do, a good leader is going to piss off about half the people all the time. So if you're really, really popular, you're probably not a very good leader. And if and if everybody hates you, you're not a good leader. So I wouldn't want to be on the committees that are going to make those decisions. But I would like to see big fields that are affordable to race in and that put on good shows for people who want to watch something when they're not wrenching on their race car. And the few spectators we get, and although, the live web coverage is really kind of an element that's, I think, superior to Speed Vision and back in the day for IMSA or anything else. It's really, really cool. So that's kind of fun to watch yourself race on TV or be able to go back and see one of your buddies on the other coast, how they did on their majors weekend or something. Yep. Man, that's really cool. And you do a great job on commentating that stuff, by the way. I really enjoy it.
Thank you.
So, my opinion is change is good. Tradition is good. If change is required for the traditions to continue, then I think that's something that we've got to explore. And it's not ever easy. Right. It's just not ever easy.
Yeah. It's tough, and we're going to do a lot more on this, I'm sure, over the next couple of months, and once it comes out, and we don't know what the end result's going to be yet. So one of the reasons I asked the question is you're talking about what you're going to pick to drive next. You might want to hold a beat on that to find out which classes are actually going to be Runoffs eligible. And the next question I was going to ask you is, so you and I grew up from the same era, I think, pretty close.
Yeah. Pretty close, yeah.
And when I grew up, Indianapolis was a thing that the pro drivers did.
Yes.
It was where you went. I never actually went to the 500. My dad was not a big fan of crowds, so we went to see qualifying a couple of times and practice and that kind of stuff. But it never got to the big race. But that was the thing as a kid. Heroes and legends raced at Indy.
No. I'm right there with you. I watched the Indy 500 every Memorial Day weekend on Sunday since I was a little boy. I still do when I can.
Yeah, I mean, I used to watch it. I had to watch it on tape delay because it wasn't live. You'd listen to it on the radio, and then at 10 o'clock at night, it would be on ABC Live. This was even to the middle 80s before they started doing it live.
Sure.
But anyway, but when SCCA went there for the first time for the runoffs, I was like, wait a second. I could drive on that racetrack legally?
Yeah. So cool.
And not in a tour bus? Is that did you do either of the runoffs there, or?
I did both of them as a coach.
Okay.
I did not drive there. The 911 that I have, the e-production car, was built specifically to win that race. I built it to go, what year was that? 17? Something like that?
I think
18 maybe?
18 and 19 maybe, or 19 and 20?
Maybe. I built a weapon. I set it on kill. I built a 911 that I thought was going to be the greatest thing in the world. And then I got, speaking of rule changes, I spent, 911 engines are not the cheapest engine to build, and 911s are not the cheapest cars to prepare. And it's a 71 911 and we bought the best heads, we bought the best piston, we bought all the stuff. And someone else asked to be allowed to have two spark plugs in another kind of Porsche. I want to say it was a 914 or it was a 944 or something. I can't remember what exactly it was. And so the comp board looked at that rule. And by the way, I had dual plugs. I was ready to go because, in a Porsche, when you build a dual plug engine, most of the racing Porsches had dual plug engines. And an open in production cars with an unlimited prep rule, you could drill a hole in any part of the combustion chamber you wanted. As long as you don't add material, you can do whatever you want. So and ignition systems are free. So you can have a twin plug. You don't have to ask.
Right.
You were okay with a twin plug deal. But by this guy asking, the comp board revisited that and went, oh, wow, maybe we don't want twin plugs running around on these cars. So let's change the rule. It'll be okay. And they changed it to all cars must have the stock delivered number of spark plugs. And so my $75,000 Porsche engine now was useless in the Sports Car Club of America. And I don't have an extra $75,000 laying around.
Sure.
So I had to try to sell that engine. And then finally I built a single plug engine, which literally just got done.
Nice.
And it works pretty good. It's not the weapon that one would have been. But I'm going to go and win some e-production races, I hope, with that car, at least at the runoffs. And I got a classification for e-production for the third gen RX-7 here just recently. I think that got approved. I know in the prelims it was approved. Right. So I think what I might do is race my third gen RX-7 in e-production. I love the production cars. I've never really I have some races in them. I've done races in that group. I've never gone to the runoffs in a production car. But, man, I love I love anything where you get to wrench the car and build something that as your vision is.
Yep.
I was the program director of that D Sports Racer that we did at Level 5 that went under 2 minutes for the first time at Road America. That was my program.
Nice.
Jeff Brown worked for me on that engineering, and it was a fantastic deal. We achieved all of our objectives, but I loved it because in D Sports Racing, they give you a little box. Here's a box, build a car, stick it in there and see if you can beat people with it, And I love that kind of stuff and very restrictive stuff. Spec Miata, wonderful competition. It's great. I love it. It's been hugely successful. I raced Miatas before it was cool. When they were chick cars, I raced in showroom stocks.
Yep.
But I don't like it. But all that happens when you make things really restrictive is it gets harder to find an advantage and more expensive to find an advantage.
Right.
So now we got $60,000, Spec Miatas out.
Right.
So anyway, so that, I'm going to go on a rant. I didn't want to do that.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, I'm actually now, after many years of not driving, looking to get back into a car. And because I have a feeling, and again, I have zero insider information. What people think I do inside the SCCA, I'm an SCCA insider. Well, I'm a little bit of an SCCA insider, but I am independent of the club with the podcast for the reason that I want to be able to have sometimes tough conversations, and I think we're going to have some of those moving forward on what the changes are for the runoffs. But because I'm also independent, they don't give me all the tidbits from the inside. But as we do the rotation around the popular racetracks to do the runoffs, I am extremely hopeful that Indy will be back on the schedule here. Maybe not after Road America, but maybe one set after Road America. And that would be a childhood dream for me come true, to be able to go and race.
It's a bucket list for me, for sure. And I really wanted to race that year. And I've had fun. I coached, I did a little work with David Pinterick there, and I coached Scotty there, at the Runoffs. I think we had podiums in both of those results, and I love the place. And I had a chance. I had 2 opportunities to run in the Indy 500 as a driver when I was much younger, and I didn't get. Neither one of them went all the way, and one of them because I bailed out because I didn't like the team very much, and I thought, and it was right when the IRL cars had first come out and they were starting to hurt people by backing them into walls and breaking their backs and stuff. And I went, I want to do it, but I'd kind of like to continue walking if I have a mistake, because it's likely that I will.
Right.
And then the second one was with Dick Simon Racing, and we got within, everybody's got to bring money, right? Everybody thinks there's professional race car drivers, but the reality is, even at the highest levels, you're expected to bring something to the table.
Right.
And my father-in-law at the time sort of gave me a little help and got me hooked up with Dick Simon Racing, and got all the funding we needed short of $50,000, which doesn't sound like much money right now.
Yeah.
And Dick Simon, was trying to tell me at the time, he goes, Ed, you're good. Let's just do it. Yeah. You finish 30-30. If you get in the show, you're good. You won't. Yeah, but I was just worried that I wouldn't make the show and I'd owe somebody $50,000. And at that time I was teaching at the Skip Barber School or something, and I was going to take forever before I was ever going to pay off a $50,000 net if I didn't make the 500. That's a mistake on my part. That was being probably too conservative, but I missed that I didn't do that. But the SCCA is going to give me an opportunity to drive on Indianapolis maybe again, and I'm going to take that. I was going to do it back in 17, and next time it comes around, I'll hopefully have a legal motor and they won't change the rules the year before the race, and I'll be able to run. We'll see.
That was around the time that Scott Harrington was making his runs for Indy, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe that's right.
Yeah,
it was 2000, I think, was the first opportunity, and 2001 or 2 was the second opportunity that I had. Maybe it was in the late 90s, the first one. I can't remember.
Scott and his dad were our Sports Renault customer service reps. They were based out of Louisville, and when Dad was doing a Spec Racer Ford, those guys were the guys we take the car to. So always followed him doing his stuff. So let's talk about coaching a little bit, okay? So I'm a guy who's been around the sport for 35 years, and 86 was when Dad bought the first car. When I was alive. He raced back in the 60s. He raced H Production, Spridgets, and Sprites, and all that kind of stuff. Took a big break. 86, buys a car, starts in a Formula V, goes to Sports Renault, ends up in IT Hondas. That's the story. I've done some racing, mostly in Hondas, a little bit of Formula V. I've been off now for 30, well, no. Let's see, my kid's going to be 19, so about 22, 23 years since I've driven a competitive car wheel to wheel. How do you get a guy like me in today's world up to speed?
Wow, that's a good question. And I do work with drivers of all ages. I have, Scotty, who's my age. He's actually a little older than me. And then Randy Johnson, who's yeah. Well, let's just say he's older than me. But he is, and we have another guy that works with us, Randy Johnson, who you may have met. Randy is, he's a little older than both of us and has just started racing. So he's a novice in his 70s.
Wow.
And I also have coached. Yeah, he's a great guy, and he loves it. He's so passionate about it. And then I've also coached many kids. I ran a Formula Mazda team, and I raced I ran a bunch of guys that were in their teens, and their parents were footing the bill. And the basics are all the same, but the way people of different ages learn is a lot different. But you know what? What's similar, I guess I should say, and what the value of a coach like me, who's not cheap, if you think that a professional coach is expensive, try using a cheap one.
Mm-hmm. Try finding a cheap one.
But what I do for anybody, whether they're career-oriented kid or a guy like Scotty or a guy like Randy in particular, if you start late in life and you want to get serious about winning, what I do is I'm a time machine. I can compress the amount of time, the amount of calendar days, the amount of races, and make each lap you get more valuable, and you can get where you want to go much faster by having a driver coach.
Right.
And my methods of getting them there are really kind of similar in both scenarios, but each driver, not just different ages of drivers like you or somebody, they all learn differently. Some guys learn by watching a video. Some people are great on sims. Some people learn they're tactile. They need to ride with somebody and show them what the car can do. And so there are different ways people learn. And a good coach, in addition to being a good communicator and a good observer and a good listener, is going to learn how their student learns. It's why I don't do one-day deals. Brian, if you called me up and said, "Hey, Ed, how much are you for a day?" I wouldn't take your money. I'd say I can't really. One day I'd have to work for free because I'm the student on day one.
Right.
I'm learning where you're at. I've got some paperwork that you can tell me before what you think your weaknesses are and what you think your strengths are. And then after you work with me for a few races, we'll revisit that and see what's changed about your own opinion of yourself and what you think you're doing better. But I'll, that's kind of where we start with everybody. Right. I mean, it's I can't do it in one day. It takes a little bit of time, and I need to learn how you learn and what you respond to, and you need to learn my lexicon and what our common dialogue is going to be, how we do the ritual, which is the plan. I call it the planning wheel. I've talked about it a lot, but I mean, it's basically you got to have a vision, you got to have which is your objective, and then you got to have a set of, have a plan. And the plan is tactics, strategies. After you have your clear vision, you got to have what series of races are you going to run, and then you have to brief what the plan is before everything, right? Before the weekend, before the session, and then you debrief after, and then you incorporate what you learned, and that whole thing rotates around like a wheel. It's a planning wheel. And so that's how I do it, and that's kind of how we did it at level 5, and that's how I do it with Scotty. And it's a weekend ritual. Everybody knows it. We all go right to the office and we sit down and get ready for the beatings to begin.
You came up when I came up. We didn't have sims.
Right.
We've got sims now. A lot of us old folks don't like them. I've learned to embrace my suckiness on them, but I find value in it. What's your thought on sims?
Man, I think sims are. This is a great question, and I'm going to get in a lot of trouble answering it. So thanks very much for this opportunity for every
it's just you and me.
Guy. I am, first of all, I'm not a Luddite. I've driven the driver in the loop simulator at Multimatic in Canada. I've driven some high-end simulators. I love simulators. At level 5, we could tune the prototypes to where the driver could tell a chassis change on the sim and make 1 or 2 tenths on a lap, and then that change would work in the real car at the track. I'm a believer in sims. What I'm not a believer in is that sims replace seat time in the real car. Earlier, we talked about art and science, right? I mean, racing is part art, part science. Simulators, and I think most pro drivers would tell you that the most important skill that any race driver can develop, it's like playing jazz, Brian. It's like playing jazz. It's like you have to get a feel. You have to get a feel for the grip available. And it's like getting a nose for it. You have to get a sense, whether you want to call it a taste or a smell, but you need to be sniffing around for the grip every lap, every turn, all the time. And you have to feel where it is, because the only constant in a lap around a racetrack is change. The tires change every lap. The surface changes every lap. The temperatures are different. You've got to constantly be finding that grip. I always laugh because, I grew up in Seattle, right? I mean, it rains all the time. Right. And so people will ask me, we were racing a track, I'm working with you, it's the first weekend together, we're going to race in the rain. And you go, Ed, man, I'm glad I caught you over here. Come on, show me what the rain line is here at Lime Rock, or what's the rain line at Seattle. And my answer is always the same. Well, the rain line is the same as the dry line. It's wherever the grip is.
Right.
So if the polished line that's in the dry is too slippery in the wet, then don't drive on it.
Right.
But if it's not, then drive the biggest radius possible and open up your exits and do all the basic fundamental things that we've been working on for 20 years. So yeah, I think that's the fundamental thing is where the grip is, and that's the most important thing any driver needs to learn how to do. And so simulator can't teach you that.
Right.
It can kind of teach you that, and it does teach you some good stuff. Like you can simulate a lot of wheel-to-wheel racing stuff that's really good, but a guy that just does simulators in the absence of actual seat time, which is very expensive. I get it. It's a very inexpensive alternative or addition to, but not replacement for. I think we've seen a lot of very young guys become very successful recently. Guys like Connor Zilic and other guys that come out of the sim world, and a good friend of mine, Jim Daniels, is a coach. He's running and he runs Spec Miata guys. He works with Mustang Challenge guys. Good guy, known Jim a long time. But he made a statement on Facebook not long ago. He said that in order to be successful, you've got to have hundreds of hours of sim time. You have to be on the simulator every day. And I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. But let's go to the track once in a while. Right. Let's work on other stuff. Let's work on what a setup change feels like. Let's work on how to be a test driver.
Right.
Let's learn how to talk to the media.
Right.
Let's do all this other stuff too. I like sims. Sims are now where I'm going to go off on a tangent just for a second here.
Yeah, go.
So when I was one of the very first, I think, professional driver coaches to kind of gain any sort of notoriety. And other guys have been doing it. They haven't always been called driver coaches. They've been called crew chiefs and dad and Uncle Mario and whatever. There've been coaches that have always helped the most successful drivers. It's why repeated success tends to run in families, right?
Right.
So coaching was not very accepted, and even now, some of the old timers. I know Brian Redmond. He's a great driver from for a long time. He doesn't really like driver coaches that much. He doesn't really believe in them, and I can respect that. I get it. People don't always understand, but in the 80s, or let's say the 90s, when I started driver coaching at a higher level in the 2000s, driver coaching was where data systems were in the 80s, right? I mean, so if you had data systems in the 80s, you were either a manufacturer or a geek. Yeah. And if a guy, drivers would tell you, man, I don't need any of that stuff. I know what's going on by the seat of my pants. I know I'm flat through the kink at Road America. And the engineer goes, dude, you got a big lift and a light brake before the kink here at Road America. and the drivers didn't like that. So they didn't like data and they hated it. And nowadays, if you don't have data and you can't work it, you're not anywhere. You're just absolutely not taken seriously. And I think now driver coaching is getting kind of that level where if you don't have a solid driver coach, nobody's going to take you seriously. Right. I mean, why would you not choose to have a trusted set of eyes, not watching your performance on the track, but watching all of your competitors at the same time? What an advantage that is. Right. Why would you not want that? Your seat of the pants is not that good. So I think sims are now in that same range. Right. It's you got to be taken seriously. You better be doing some sim work, but it's part of a balanced diet.
Right.
Right. It's not the only thing. It's got to do the rest of the work.
As I tell people, obviously you want to be in an actual race car as much as possible. But as we all know, especially at our level, that's expensive. And
it is.
There's always a risk reward to every single lap you're in a race car. And
that's true.
You don't have to worry about that in a sim. Even the simple iRacing sims, there's value in it. But you have to measure that value against the actual time in the race car.
Yes.
And you talked about how there's so many second and third generation great race car drivers. I would argue that it's better to have a coach than dad, because most kids don't want to hear what dad's got to say, and will never.
That's really true.
And will never think that dad knows what they're talking about. Dad could be Mario Andretti, and you might not want to listen to him. Ask Michael about that.
That's funny, but that's absolutely true. And I say this all the time. A lot of these guys, like in endurance racing, let's say in IMSA or other endurance racing series, you find a lot of young drivers are the co-driver of an older driver and also the coach, and that's fine.
Yep.
But I have two problems with that. Number one, it takes money out of my pocket. I'd like to be a driver coach for that team of drivers. But more than that, that young driver who may have just come out of go-karts may be a fantastic shoe, but he may not be a great educator. He may not be the guy that can help that older man do what he does, because he may not even know. He just does it.
Right.
I don't know how to teach you to do it. I mean, what do you do with your hands and feet to get through that turn so well? I don't know, look for the apex and try to get on the gas earlier, more gas, less brake. That's not a driver coach.
Right.
That's some guy that belongs to an HPDE instruction, which, by the way, HPDE guys, you are my heroes. You are totally necessary to the growth of this sport. So I'm not putting down any HPDE high performance driving instructors, but that job is different than the job of a racing coach.
Absolutely.
It's a different job, and my level of experience and other guys' levels of experience are different than that guy's experience. Right. So, yeah, and I also think in that same scenario, if the co-driver is the coach, he can't do that job, because if he's going to be a coach, he needs to be focused on the coaching job. And if he's going to be a driver, he better be focused on being the quickest pro. And a professional coach is coaching the slow gentleman driver to be the fastest of the gentleman drivers. Yep. That's what we did at level 5. I was Tucker's driver coach, and the way we won all those ALMS championships and races was the pro in the pro-am. It's the am driver that's the X factor. You make him the fastest, and you win all the races. Right. That's the whole trick. So anyway, see, another rant you sent me off on, Brian. Sorry about that.
You and I are going to have more podcasts together, because we got stuff to talk about. Before we move on, 2 things.
Sure.
You dropped a name a minute ago, and no one is going to believe that I haven't told you this before. Okay. You can verify it with me. Brian Redman is our guest next week on Inside the SCCA.
Oh, that's fantastic.
We recorded the episode last weekend. He doesn't he doesn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it live because he doesn't do stuff in the evening, which is great. So we recorded the episode. It's a fantastic episode. I cannot wait to put it out there. And
I can't wait to see it. Brian's one of my favorite drivers of all time. He's a great guy.
I have always wanted to talk with him. I grew up in the Midwest with the legend of Brian Redman's cat at Road America and the whole spiel. And I've got the story about Brian Redman's cat from Brian Redman himself, folks. And
I love that.
It is. I told him right off the stop, we're going to get to all this racing stuff, and you're going to talk about Porsche and Ferrari and all the fantastic. But at some point in time, you and I are going to talk about the cat, and we did.
All right. I love it.
So that's next week's episode, folks. Tune in. It's going to be awesome. It is
excellent
awesome.
Segue there.
Yeah,
great,
it's perfect.
Great segue.
Perfect. And before we get on to Road America, because that's the whole reason we had you on here.
I know.
I need to thank the people who helped me make this possible. Racekeeper is the official in-car camera of Inside the SCCA. Great folks there. You've seen my videos that I did with the solo stuff that we did last year. Fantastic cameras, and they got something new coming out that I think a lot of people are going to be real excited about. I can't talk about it yet, but when I can, we're going to talk about it on the show. Also, Ray Esports. We're talking about sim racing. Ray Esports is the official Inside the SCCA Esports, the unofficial SCCA Esports League. Best part about Ray Esports is the people who are participants are race car drivers mostly, and they act in the sim like they are on a racetrack, and there's less contact, and they actually try to use it as a like on the track racing experience, and that is the best part about it. You can go iRacing and you get a bunch of goons out there, and they all want to do is bump you and run you, and they watch too much other racing series where that actually happens. We try to avoid that on Ray Esports, and that is the best part about Ray Esports. And a lot of SCCA racers out there who you'll see on the racetrack and on the sim, so that's also cool. And then also Solo Performance Specialties. Those guys are at almost all of the National Tour events. They're at the Solo Nationals. Dave and his crew, great people, and always for all of your solo needs, check them out. They've got all the stuff. You don't have to get to them at the racetrack. You can catch them online and order from them online as well. All of the information for all of our partners here are in the show notes. Just scroll down to the bottom of the screen and check them out. Also, while I'm on my little rant, hit like, hit subscribe, smash the like button, hit subscribe, all that stuff. So the algorithm knows that we're out here, and it helps us a ton, so we appreciate that. Okay, Ed Zabinski's our guest. We're talking racing, talked a lot about coaching and all that kind of stuff, but we're here for the Super Tour runoffs, or for the Super Tour Road America situation here. That's what we're talking about, at least that's what we scheduled ourselves to talk about. We haven't talked much about Road America itself. You got a lot of laps around there, 4 miles in the Kettle Moraine Forest, the National Park of Speed. What is your, I always have to try the same 4 or 5 questions. What's the key to a fast lap at Road America? Let's start with that.
Well, okay, here it is. Unfortunately, it's something I have to borrow from another racing driver who put it very succinctly and completely accurately. Guy by the name of P.D. Cunningham, who you may have heard of him.
P.D. was my first coach at my first solo school.
Nice.
And he's racing this weekend at Road America.
Outstanding. Well, I'll have to run over and see him.
Yeah, he was PD.
PD's a great guy. I've known him forever.
Yep.
We started racing kind of around the same time. He was a few years ahead of me, I think.
Yep.
So PD says that he's right. I mean, I can't do any better than this. He says the secret to a fast lap at Road America is two things: mentum and momentum. So as tongue-in-cheek as that is, it's all racetracks are momentum tracks in my view, which is why learning how to race in a low-powered car is really an advantage over trying to learn in a Trans Am car or a Ferrari, right? You learn momentum, and every car is a momentum car. Every track is a momentum car. None more so, though, than Road America, because it's such a long track and the average lap speed is so high that every little mile per hour that you give away unnecessarily is very costly.
Right.
Because everybody can stand on the gas the whole way down a long straightaway. But it's the minimum corner speeds have to be correct. They can't be a little too fast or a little too slow, or it's going to cost you a lot of time. So how do you get momentum at Road America? And that is, the magic is all in the brake release.
Right.
It's about approaching the corner with the car ready to change direction, not too fast, and rolling in enough speed and still making it all the way to that inside curb and being on the power as you're coming off the brake, whether you're left foot or right foot braking. I would say brake release is where the magic is. And then that's from a driving standpoint. And, everybody focuses on the kink. Everybody focuses on, all the little details, but it's really about just not giving up the middle of the corner too much and maintaining the speed. Now, if you get greedy, it becomes a money loser. If you're not getting a solid exit, if you've got a big push past the apex, you're not going to be fast. Right. But the other challenge about Road America that's fascinating, I can't wait to see this after the repave, is the curbing. Right. The curbing is really a big part of the story at Road America, because this is like, the kink is this. It's brr, 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 brr. And if you don't hear it like that, You're not doing the kink right. You got to hear and feel those curbs. And a lot of people don't think about this, but like coming out of turn 5, the exit curbing is really worth a lot of miles per hour in terms of the radius. But if your chassis can't handle the bumps and you can't put the power down, well, then it's a waste of time to go out there.
Right.
So you need shock data. You need to know how to set up the nose, the blow-offs, all the shock stuff to know that outside rear is going to go through those curves and shoot you down to the next corner.
Right.
Those are kind of I think the three elements, the momentum thing. I mean, it's certainly brake release and getting your line and your minimum speed correct in each corner, and then making sure that your car can use the curbing that's available to you.
Right. So that's a fast lap. I've got a theory on how to be successful over the course of a race, though. And I want to hear if you're kind of agree with me here. And if you don't, please tell me. After 40 minutes with you, I'm pretty certain you're going to tell me I'm full of crap if I am.
I absolutely will be happy to do that.
But Road America has about the same amount of really good passing zones as just about any other racetrack out there. There's only 2 or 3 really good passing zones. The difference at Road America is it's a 4-mile lap. So you're only going to get those 2 or 3 zones 12 times. So you're going to have 36 shots at a good passing zone. Whereas if you've got 2 or 3 good passing zones in Ohio at 2.2 miles or 2.4 miles,
sure,
you're going to get 18 shots at that or 20 shots. And now you've got, let's say, 60 chances to make passes. So you have to really optimize every lap that you have there because you have so few laps.
I agree with you 100%, actually. But I would add some stuff to that.
Sure.
I agree with you 100%. But so how do you change that equation? So I believe that you change that equation by doing things in racecraft, which, by the way, we could do a whole podcast on what racecraft means, because I see it as a language. It's racecraft is not just how car placement and doing safe passes. Racecraft is the language that race car drivers use to speak to one another. One guy that's in a different class is asking permission by where he places his car, whether he can have the corner and not screw both of you up for the next lap. A guy that's in the same class takes the inside early and says, you have to go around the outside, buddy. I mean, this is the kind of communication that's part of racecraft.
Right.
But it is also a little bit of placing your car in the way of somebody getting a great exit, or, holding them, maybe outside longer than they want, and changing the way they're going to get into and out of the corner. Now, you know what the outcome is going to be ahead of time. They might not necessarily know that. So in addition to those passing places, there are plenty of opportunities to, let's say, kind of create some of your own opportunities, or to, if you're racing a guy that's good in a very equal car, you're going to have to be creative. You want to be clean. I'm not suggesting that somebody do something dirty. I'm just saying that you've got to have a level of awareness of what's going on to answer the question that you asked, which is, how do you run a race at Road America? It's by not letting the guy run his race the way he wants to run it.
Right.
So if you're close, there'll be opportunities to do that. And that's a pretty big thing.
Right.
But again, finish all the laps, no mistakes, push a straight car into the trailer. Those are the overarching things that you have to do. And that, by the way, supports the SCCA Green to Checkered initiative. I mean, we're not having any fun watching some moron who spun on the first lap on cold tires trying to go into turn 5 faster than anybody's ever done it. And now we're walking around the track in a full course yellow, or worse, a red or black flag. So, you owe it to me, Brian, owes it to Ed Zabinski, and I owe it to Joe Shabodnik, whoever is out there on the track. I owe it to them to not screw up their session.
Right.
So that's another thing, is that you got to exploit all the track time that you're going to get in practice and qualifying to make sure you start in a good position, and make sure that you buy some burgers and beers the week at Road America, buy some guys some brats, because you need drafting friends at Road America.
Yep.
You got to have drafting. They don't have to even be in your class, but you've got to have a plan in advance. You got to say, hey man, I was noticing that we're running kind of close together. I know you're a different class, but you're kind of screwing me up in this one spot. If you'd let me have that, I could tow you down the straightaway. I mean, there's deals to be made at Road America.
Yep.
And you better have them. And they're more important in qualifying than they are in the race.
Right.
But if you can get a tow or a bump or a push, I'm not,
right.
I know the rules, but, that's going to be helpful.
Right.
That's how you get, and like I say, I have been the architect of 1 as a driver at Road America and 5 as a driver, coach, or entrant at Road America national championships.
Nice.
So these things are important. These little things. So driving the track's one thing, and the other cool thing about Road America, I know you know this.
Yes.
One of the great things about, and back to jazz, Saxman, it's the nuances at Road America is where the fun is. It's where the speed is. Right. It's not just, drive fast, get check. It's not that. It's, you got to find the details where you go, man, if I do something think outside the box at Road America. Think outside maybe if I turn in a little earlier than I think I should, maybe I'm going to get a little more speed. Maybe if I don't track out as far as I want to, and I spend more time going in the direction at the exit rather than tracking out forever. Like turn 1 is a great example. What kind of car are you in turn 1? How much of that run out do you really need at the exit? Are you going to go and get the car all upset? Are you going to drive an extra 200 yards while somebody was smarter and turned in later and squared it off and beat you like I did down to turn 3 and pass 2 guys and win a national championship? I mean, that's thinking outside the box. So,
right.
If you just drive the line, you're going to do fine.
Right.
But you might not win.
Right. And part of that racecraft is knowing that you might not want to do the out of the box every lap, but you want that in your toolbox to know when to pull it out.
Right. And you got to do scenario based, visualization. I'm a big, Ross Bentley's a great coach. He literally wrote the book on driver coaching, and I've known Ross a long time. We don't do things. We do a lot of things similarly, but we do a lot of things very differently. And, but he has he loves visualization. He's right. I mean, we were talking about how expensive seat time is. I'd argue that visualization, closing your eyes and visualizing a lap, is as valuable or very close to as valuable as doing simulation laps, not in racing, but in just, practicing. Because once you have that rhythm, right, back again to jazz, once you have that rhythm and you can close your eyes and go through the whole motions of going through the gears, running around the corners, and you get to start finish about the time that your real lap would be, those are valuable laps. Yep. Right. Yep. And so imagine scenarios. Okay, well, what am I going to do if a guy tries to block me in one? What am I going to do if a guy is right next to me going into turn 7? I mean, what if a guy got to run out of 6 and now I can't get to the curbing? Well, what are you going to do? The answer is you're not going to go side by side through 7 and both of you come out the other side. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So don't try that. Let's race to live to race another day.
One of the things I was taught about visualization was do it with a stopwatch. And
sure.
And at the end of your lap, click it. And if you're close to where your lap time's supposed to be, you're visualizing properly.
Right.
You're in that rhythm. And because if you're not visualizing in the right tempo or the right pace, it kind of almost, it's not worthless, but it's a lot more effective if you're actually doing it in the right time.
This isn't exactly on our topic, but it's a very good tool that I'd like other drivers to use. This is a little free gift from my coaching process. If you watch like YouTube videos of fast laps around a racetrack,
right.
You want to learn a new racetrack, which simulation is very useful for learning new racetracks.
Sure.
If it's your first time at Road America, definitely get some sim time for sure. And you should get an hour of sim time for every hour you're going to be on track at the racetrack. That's the way I kind of look at it. But as you're going to learn the track, watch a YouTube video. And what I have my guys do is I say, okay, watch the video a few times, get used to it. And after you've watched it a few times, let it run and then close your eyes, let it run, turn down the sound, and then pause it, open your eyes. And if you can instantly recognize where you are on the track, you've started to learn it. Now you won't waste the first session figuring out which way it is left or right coming up, So that's kind of like my method of learning a track quickly and knowing that you really know it without, and going on to the next step and getting to learn it, which is maybe sims or something.
All right. Where are the danger zones at Road America?
Okay. Well, obviously the kink is the first one everybody's going to think of. If you, there's a lot of stuff that I teach about the kink that I'm probably not going to share on your podcast,
Fair enough.
But it's, everybody does, I will say this, the mistake is a guy trying to late break into the kink, which is ridiculous.
Right.
It's the dumbest thing you can ever do. You don't, first of all, the kink is a straightaway. It's not a turn.
Right.
And even in a very, very fast car, if you have a really fast car, you probably have wings. And if you have wings, you're going to be flat through the kink. If you have to brake for the kink, you're going to be in like some kind of car with not much aero and a lot of horsepower.
Right.
So that speed adjustment should be early and light so that you can be on the power entering the kink with the diff locked and the chassis settled and the rear end where it needs to be, so that if you get it wrong, you're going to be able to drive out the other line. And so that's a danger spot. I think the most dangerous spot actually is turn 7.
Okay.
There's a spectacular crash to be had, and it happened a couple of years ago in the Spec Miata race, where if you don't get all the way, if you don't use all the curb on the inside for turn 7, for people who don't know, turn 7 is the sort of easy left at the top of a hill into hurry downs,
right.
Which is it's not really hard. It's just a bend in the road, but it's very intimidating. And if you don't get the turn in right, you're going to get 2 wheels off in the dirt at the exit. And if you do that, it's so hard to not hook slide over across the track, collect 4 or 5 cars on the way, and plow the inside wall.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the biggest danger spots. Another one is Canada Corner. I would also, after doing the kink and hearing those the little trick there, that curbing is on the left, right, left, then right again. There's 4 little bumps you ought to hear or feel, Broop, 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 broop. Well, your brake calipers feel those 4 things too. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not reaching across with your left foot and tapping the brakes and making sure you get the knockback out of the pads and them up against the rotors, and then you try to late brake Canada Corner, you're going to have an unfortunate visit with the gravel trap and maybe the bleachers.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you do that your brakes are going to work. And I think if you watch most pros, you're going to see the brake lights flash before Canada Corner, and make sure that somebody's home in the brake system. Other than that, I actually think Road America is a relatively safe racetrack.
Right.
It's, there's a lot of 90-degree corners. There's a lot, it's kind of basic stuff.
Yep.
The carousel, you spend, it's not typically dangerous, although, I've seen a couple of horrific crashes. I've been actually, David Pinterick had a huge crash in a Viper Club event at the exit of the carousel, which scared me so bad. I started dialing his number. I don't think I quit dialing it. We weren't working together, but I saw the video and I called him until I talked to him because it really scared me. He got a lot of air. And then I was coaching, I don't know that I was really coaching him. I was consulting with a guy named Jim Booth, who had a huge crash going down into 5 in a Ferrari, where they touched wheels right where the road narrows. And he went for a ride that took him into the fence on the outside of the braking area to turn 5 in a 458 Ferrari. It's on YouTube. It's a spectacular crash. And there's always, high speeds are part of the Road America experience, right? And anytime you have high speeds, the potential for a tremendous accident are always there. So, yeah, I recommend not having a lot of contact and making sure you get your turn-ins right and know where you're looking. And again, you got to look further ahead. I don't care how far ahead you look. Road America, you better be looking as far ahead as you're looking into next week. You need to look all the way around turn 1, all the way around turn 3. Make sure you know where you're going to be in the braking zone for 5. You can't see through turn 6. So you better be able to imagine your way through the hillside to know where the apex is, and you better get there. Same thing, turn 7, a little bit blind. Where's that apex? That's the key critical thing. Turn in so that you get your inside tire, you eat all of that curb. And then, the carousel, there's a lot of time to be had in the carousel. And I'll tell you how to do it. You just have to send a check.
Fair enough. By the way, it's not a video podcast. It's an audio only podcast, but we did a podcast with David on surviving the big one. And and that's the wreck that we talked about. And how
the Jim Booth crash?
No, the one that he had at in the Viper you were talking about.
Oh, David Pinterick. Yes. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And talk about how the safety equipment worked, what he might do differently after that wreck, what did he learn, that kind of stuff. So you can catch that on all the regular.
I'll have to listen to it. I love David Pinterick. Yeah. I really do. I consider him a good friend. I coached him for 2 years in Trans Am, helped him get his first win in Trans Am at Daytona. Very, very fun group of guys to work with. Still really love those guys. Great guy.
I'll actually
glad he's still around racing.
I'll put a link to that podcast in the show notes as well. So
great.
But good stuff there. Last question, because we're running out of time. I've got this theory that people start to check out after an hour, which means we got to have you on for another hour for another podcast sometime down the road.
I'm happy to come back anytime, Brian.
What's your favorite part of two questions? Same question, but two different ways. What's your favorite part of of driving Road America? And then just what's your favorite part about Road America?
Oh, man, that is a good question. Well, so I'll try to keep it as short as I can. I know you're trying to wrap this stuff up. I think, and I love driving Road America. I really do. I maybe have more laps around there than any other racetrack that I've been on. We tested there with level 5 in the 430 Ferraris. We tested the DSR there. I was a test driver for that program. We tested I ran my Mustang there a lot. I've raced there a lot. But I think the best thing about the track is the elevation. I love all the elevation. I love all of, because it's not just the big hills. You have to think 3-dimensionally at Road America, even in the flat turns.
Yeah.
There's anything you can find that's elevation that'll help you. You find the grip, the fast line is where the grip is. Well, there's a couple places at Road America that the line isn't the classic line. It's, it might be different than that. There might be some place that you want to go that's different, but I love how rewarding it is to do things well at Road America. It rewards you with satisfaction, but it also rewards you with miles per hour and RPMs at the exit and down the end of the straightaway. And when you got a mile-long straightaway almost, and you leave 4 miles an hour on the table at the exit, you can read a book in the amount of time that it's going to take you to make that up. It's just, it's unrecoverable.
Yeah.
So it rewards precision, it rewards technique, it rewards sensing the grip and the change of the grip, because I'll tell you, a lap in the morning at Road America is going to be a lot faster than a lap in the afternoon. And a lap at the June sprints at Road America is that put you on the pole is going to put you in the top 10 at the runoffs. It's going to be way faster in the fall.
Yep.
So when you're playing that jazz tune, as we're doing that tempo, it's faster in the fall. We got to, count it off a little bit faster because,
sure.
you got your rhythm is going to be different. And then the thing about Road America,
it could be snowing in the fall.
It could be. I think it has been there in the fall. I think I've driven in hail there that was like driving on ball bearings when we were testing.
We qualified one year in May in a snowstorm at the Cat Nationals. When the Cat Nationals were in May back in the day, it was not snow that was sticking to the racetrack, but it was snow that was sticking to the grass around the racetrack, and big, huge snow. It was crazy. But anyway, continue.
So the second half of your question was, what do I like about Road America?
Just the whole experience.
So there's like three or four things. Number one, at the gearbox, I like the chicken salad croissant. I really think you ought to try the chicken salad croissant at the gearbox.
Okay.
Brats are, everybody loves brats, but the chicken salad croissant is like a staple for me when I'm at Road America.
Okay.
They stopped having it for a little while, and I made them tell me where they got the chicken salad. It's just, anyway, but so that's one of the things for me. The other thing is that I have a perpetual record there. We did the DSR thing. We were the first SCCA legal car in the 53 years at the time to go under 2 minutes. Right. And that means a lot to me. That was my program. It was my vision. It was my thing. Tucker got to drive the lap, and the car was spectacular, and we spent way too much money. It was crazy, and a lot of people cheered us on. A lot of people are pissed off, but we did it, and we achieved every objective, and I own that. In fact, I got right behind me over my shoulder, I got a painting of the car, and I got the plaque that I gave everybody that was involved on that program that made it happen. And so the DSR thing was a big part of my life and my career.
I put your camera up, Phil. Which plaque is it?
Okay, well, so there's a painting up here. I'm going to just grab this. So here's this plaque is what I gave everybody that was on the team.
Nice.
That participated in making that record possible.
Okay.
And it really wasn't a record. Well, it's a track record that's perpetual now, I guess, because the DSR doesn't exist anymore. But we were the first to go under 2 minutes. And so let me read what it says to you. It says, Tucker's record run, Sports Car Club of America National Championship Runoffs, Road America, Elkhart Lake, September 22nd, 2012. Level 5 Motorsports made history by smashing the 56-year-old lap record and breaking the 2-minute barrier, posting the fastest lap ever recorded in an SCCA official time session at the legendary track. This plaque is presented in recognition of the dedication of the driver, engineers, and crew that made this historic feat possible. And then Ed Zabinski, program manager, test driver, Nice. So I gave that to everybody that was involved in that, at least as many of them as I could. If you don't have one and you did it and you were in that with us, let me know. I'll see if I can't get you one. But that was the biggest thing for me. That's maybe the coolest thing I think I've ever done in my career.
Cool.
So
cool.
I really love that. So that's a special thing. And then the other thing is just, the people in Wisconsin are fabulous. Everybody in Wisconsin is nice. They're going to change your tire for you if you get a flat. They're going to tell you how to get to the best burger. They're going to take care of you, whatever you need. I just love the people in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. And that's, I guess, probably the best thing.
I always let people end the show. Do you have anybody you want to thank? I mean, there's always a long list of sponsors. You're not driving a lot, but you're doing driver coaching. Who do you want to thank?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that they're helping our program with Scotty. Of course, there's Goodyear tires. Now I have to thank Hoosier at the same time, because as much as I love Goodyear, my blood runs purple, and I won all my national championship on Hoosier tires, and I still, even though the sponsorship thing isn't what it used to be, I still consider them a huge supporter of mine. And of course, Scotty White is, he was a tremendous. He's become a tremendous friend. He's one of my best friends, and he was my arch rival when I was racing in T1 in a Ferrari, and he was racing in T1 in a Viper, and the SCCA forums were wild with all the crazy stuff that was going on, and people were saying about what those two efforts were about, and we wound up racing hard for a season, and we got to develop a mutual respect for one another. And right now, his program is really all I'm doing. I'm doing some other coaching, but I'm happy to work with Scotty on anything he has going, and it's been a long relationship, and it's super fun. And for me, at this stage in my career, I want to do things that are fun, more than things that are going to make me rich. And working for Scotty is not going to make me rich. I can guarantee you. It's going to keep me alive and keep me from, as long as it keeps me eating and living indoors, that's a program I'm going to stay involved with. And then also, I guess, probably there's just, it's like you said, too many people to list that have helped me. But, it's a great sport. The SCCA itself, I know I started in conference, but I very quickly I'm closing in on being a 40-year member of SCCA. I think I got my 35-year pin here not too long ago, but it's just a great organization. And I encourage anybody that's going to start racing, or if you're been in the organization and maybe you're not driving anymore, you're looking for something to do, volunteer for some position, do something, go wave flags on a corner, go help the people in timing and scoring, go help argue with me at tech. I mean, it's a fun place to be, and it's good people, and you'll find that you have a new family when you get involved in this club, in this sport.
Screw the clock. I was going to ask you for a Scotty story.
Oh yeah.
You got one for me?
Well, what time of day does this thing usually air? What level of rating do we have?
Well, first of all, it's YouTube, so there's no real rules.
Okay, I'm still not going to tell any stories like that about Scotty. I'll tell you that one of the stories that I enjoy the most about Scotty is a runoff story. Our battle at the runoffs happened at Topeka, and he it's the uh-oh story. And the uh-oh story is he really gave me a compliment one time. He was telling a story about how they had these two Vipers supported by the factory, the best engineers, best of everything, he and Cindy Lux, and they were running these Vipers to win the runoffs. And I showed up at Miller Motorsports Park in Utah with this red Ferrari. And he goes, "Wow, who's this guy? Who's this guy? I don't know this Zabinski guy. He hadn't been running an SCCA. What's he doing?" And so I rolled the Ferrari out, and it was terrible, by the way. We hadn't started developing. It was a wicked bitch to drive. It was miserable to drive its first few races. I couldn't even, in fact, we rained that weekend, and I couldn't get it back to the pits because it started raining. And I turned on what Ferrari called ASR, and I wound up spinning off the track on the cool down lap. I mean, I couldn't even get it back to the pits. So it was terrible. But Scotty said, "Man, when you came out in the track with that car and we got behind you and I watched you drive, I said, uh-oh, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought." And I thought that's the nicest compliment maybe anybody's ever given me. And then I had an uh-oh moment for him at the runoffs because we've been running at Topeka, and I tested there a lot. We were at Topeka a lot. And I knew the track pretty well, and I knew I had a good car. And by that time at the runoffs, I had the car dialed. It was fast. It was really good. And it did ultimately win a national championship, but not that year. But so he had been messing with me like Scotty does. I'm used to racing with Scotty. He's accused of being a sandbagger. And in spite of all of the sand scratches in my windshields of cars that I followed him behind, he is an honest guy and a straight up racer, but he doesn't show everything he has all the time. Let's just say that.
Fair enough.
And I love that about Scotty. And I've learned that to do that. So we're at the runoffs and we're on the front row. He got the pole. I was on the outside front row. And at Topeka, you go over a little rise and come down. And I knew that I just had the brakes on him. I was going to be in front of him as we went through turn one. And all I had to do was keep that big fat car behind me. And notice I said car, not driver. I had to keep the big fat car behind me. And that son of a bitch came down next to me at the start. He tapped his brakes right where I thought he would. And I just started lightly getting on the brakes just to make sure I stayed in front of him. And that sucker outbraked me like I was a nothing. He had brakes on me the whole time. Frick. And he got me. And so he led the first lap. And then we both went on to have dismal results. We both had terrible results at that run. Yeah. Terrible, terrible, terrible. I think I was 5th or 6th. It was terrible. He didn't finish because he got a flat tire. A stem came off on one of his wheels. But that's probably the best Scotty story that I can tell on your podcast. But, other than, I think his girlfriend's younger than mine. That's the other one. Not a lot, but some.
I think someday I'm going to have to do an Inside the SCCA After Dark episode and get up.
Now that's a show I want to see.
Because there's a handful of people I've talked to who've told me I can't tell that story on your show. I'm going to have to create a specific show and get everybody on the show who has told me I can't tell that story on your show. and we'll do those stories because I know there's a lot of fun and frivolity that goes on at our races that make for some great
absolutely
stories.
True. Absolutely true.
Well, I'm a tip for other podcasters out there. If Scotty B. White tells you got to have so-and-so on your show, get them on your show because Ed Zabinski has not disappointed. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks very much for having me, Brian. I'll come back anytime, and I appreciate the opportunity to vent a little bit and laugh a little bit. You have a great show here, and I look forward to seeing all. Can't wait for Brian's. I'm gonna look and see that as soon as it comes out.
That's right, Brian Redmond next week. Don't want to miss that. It was a great episode. We've already got it in the can, so I can guarantee it's a good one. So that's gonna do it for this week's episode of Inside the SCCA. Did you like what you hear? Subscribe to the RacingWire Podcast Network and the Racing Network on YouTube, so you won't miss any episodes. It would also be great if you leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. If it's a bad one, go leave it on Scotty B. White's Facebook page. You can follow us on social media, find out who the next guest is, leave a question. On Twitter, it's @RacingWireNet. A new Inside the SCCA every week. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars. And if you're at Road America, look me up.
I'm Dorsey Schrader, and when I'm on my way to a race, I'll listen to the SCCA podcast, Inside the Short Bus.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the RacingWire Podcast Network and Rural 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests, and not that of the SCCA. All right, we're clear. No, that's okay. Everybody does it.